First of all, I want to thank the organizers for the fourth edition of the Global Conference on Gender and Sexuality Studies, and for inviting me to attend. And I would like to thank the participants for coming as well. The name of my talk, yes, that's me, Jenni Jones, University of North Carolina, Greensboro. And so the name of this talk is What I've Learned. And actually the full title is What I've Learned or Unlearned from Studying Black Girls, or I would actually say from being with Black girls and working with Black girls. So I first want to say a little bit about the context in which I did this work. I wanted to put on a town hall, an AAPF town hall in North Carolina, in Greensboro, North Carolina. I had attended an African-American policy town hall in Miami, Florida. The African-American Policy Forum, the co-founders of that are Kimberly Crenshaw, who's a professor of law at UCLA and Columbia Law School, and a leading authority in the area of civil rights and she's a Black feminist legal theorist, and also Luke Charles Harris, professor of political science at Vassar College and leading authority in the field of critical race theory. And the policy forum was developed as part of an ongoing effort to promote women's rights in the context of struggles for racial justice. When I wanted to do the town hall, I wanted to do it actually just for Black girls. And it became, because you have to negotiate with organizations, Black girls and Black women. I think at the end of the day, probably I was still right about this, because Black girls, they're different reasons. Black girls and Black women have problems that are similar, but they have problems that differ. And also there's a problem already about adultifying Black girls, so that when you put them in a group with Black women, all kinds of things happen. So anyway, I want to talk about in this paper some of the things that I learned from being with Black girls in an alternative school in preparation for an African-American Policy Forum town hall. In the town hall, for the town hall, you have to have testifiers. So you have to find Black girls who would testify. I ran focus groups in 2016 over a 4-month period. And the alternative school was only one of the places where I was working with Black girls. I worked with girls in other situations as well, but this was the place I really wanted to focus on. So in the fall of 2016, I sat in a classroom with a group of Black girls in an alternative school in Greensboro, North Carolina, where children are sent when they are suspended from schools they regularly attend. I conducted focus groups in preparation for this town hall that was upcoming. I was looking for testifiers, as a matter of fact. Let me see if I can move that. So I just want to say a little bit about this idea that they were in this alternative school. The African American Policy Forum had reported at that time, they had a particular document called Black Girls Matter, pushed out, overpoliced, and underprotected. So in 2011, 2012, the Department of Education findings regarding punitive disparities with respect to race and gender confirmed that the national pattern of racial disparity in the distribution of punitive discipline against Black students prevailed in New York and in Boston. Monique Morris observed in her book Push Out, The Criminalization of Black Girls in Schools, that a 2007 study had found that teachers often perceived Black girls as being loud, defiant, and precocious, and the Black girls were more likely than their white or Latina peers to be reprimanded for being unladylike. Other research has found that the issuance of summonses and or arrests appear to be justified by students' display of irate, insubordinate, disrespectful, uncooperative, or uncontrollable behavior. Let me restate that there is a perception that they display irate, insubordinate, disrespectful, uncooperative, or uncontrollable behavior. Okay, so I'm not saying whether the perception corresponds with the reality or not, but in any case, there were disparities, so that Black girls could be found having these behaviors more so than girls, white girls or Latina girls. At least they were punished for it in any case. So let me go on. Let me just talk a little bit about the methodology I used. The overall research strategy that guided my work resembled a participatory action research called PAR. So I say resembled because to quite honestly, not set out for it to be that way. It's just that on the kind of retrospectively, I realized looking at what I had done, the kind of what I did in the focus groups, the ways in which I engaged with the girls, it resembled a participatory action research strategy, which, let me see if I can get some of this here for you. Assumes independence between action and research knowledge. It emphasizes the involvement in the research and the context in which it's produced. Further, PAR methodology understands that research is not for producing knowledge alone, but for promoting research praxis that contributes to issues of social justice. PAR requires that participants acquire an active and creative role, participate in defining problems, in generating transformation strategies, and provide local and experiential knowledge about issues being addressed. At the same time, the researcher is required to move from the position of an outsider to an involved participant, such that the research becomes a collaborative process between researchers and members of the community or social group. I believe, like, if I had the time, I'm not going to do that right now, but if you went down these, and maybe you'll be able to tell from a little bit from the narrative I'm going to give, it satisfied the focus groups that I ran, satisfied each one of these points. Okay, and so yes, focus groups were the main tool or method I used. I conducted weekly focus groups with Black girls in different schools, primarily non-alternative. So the alternative school was actually an exception. So this happened over approximately a 4-month period. I had 2 visits with a girl in juvenile detention center whom I knew from the beginning could not be a testifier at the town hall. She wasn't allowed to leave that center. In fact, she was 14 years old. They were waiting till she became an adult so they could try her as an adult for murder, for first-degree murder. So, but I still went and I was speaking with her. And for me, it didn't matter because I wasn't looking for quantification here. My goal was really to find testifiers, but even more so than that, I wanted to hear what Black girls in North Carolina in my area were talking about and what Black girls in alternative schools were talking about, especially since we have all of this literature and all of this research on how Black girls are being pushed out of schools. The explicit aim of focus groups was to reveal Black girls' problems in areas of interest to the AAPF, such as school to pipeline to prison or dress code. These were the types of problems that commissioners at a town hall could address as future action items. So for example, Black girls have they have problems that fall outside of the range of what the AAPF is interested in. For example, many of them wanted to talk about problems they had with their mothers. But that's a different kind of problem to address, and it might not be the kind of a problem that you can address through commissioners at a town hall. Commissioners would have access to things like what people in the schools, people in the social welfare, things like that. But it's not clear what kind of action items could come out of speaking about this. But maybe that's something to continue looking at. So I had to find a way to not to impose an area of interest, including that of the AAP on girls, because I don't like that kind of imposition. But at the end of the day, as we'll see a little bit later, I didn't have to impose it. It turned out that the girls wanted to talk about, they ended up wanting to talk about something that fell right in line with what the AAP feels should be a topic of interest at, or that can be addressed at a town hall with commissioners. So some of the framing tools I just wanted to mention them are pocket documentaries where kids learn to use, or people, you don't have to be children, or, you learn to use your phones to make little documentaries. I also use pictures and stories to open discussions. For instance, let me just get this. I used a cover of Octavia Butler's Fledgling, which depicted little brown feet appearing from underneath a long white dress, the suggestion of a body, a shrouded face. And so I asked a group of Black girls what they thought the story was about, and they got really excited. Some said, "Oh, an African-American girl." So I had to tell them, no, it was actually, some thought it was about a Black girl, some thought it was about an African-American girl. I told them it was about neither or about both, and proceeded to read the opening pages, which were, "I awoke to darkness. I was hungry, starving, and I was in pain. There was nothing in my world but hunger and pain. No other people, no other time, no other feelings. They were mesmerized. Some said, I want that book." Through such openings, they were able to give voice to other things they wanted to talk about. Now, I just want to mention here that the little girl, or the young girl, the 14-year-old who was in the detention center.
Your voice is not audible.
Excuse me? Yes?
So, am I facing the same issue, or everyone is having same issue?
Oh, someone's having an issue?
Respond.
We can hear her clearly. It's audible clearly.
Voice audible or not?
It's clear.
Can you hear?
We can hear. She is very clear in her voice.
Is it okay?
Hear us?
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it's fine.
Oh, okay. Can you hear?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'll continue but stop me if there's a problem. Okay, so I just wanted to say that the young girl at the detention center, at the juvenile detention center, she looked at it and she was quiet. And so I posed to her what the other girls in the alternative school said. And as an aside, it turned out that she used to go to that alternative school. In any case, I said, well, some of the girls thought it was a Black girl, or they thought it was an African-American girl. And she had been very quiet, and all of a sudden she said, that this story is about someone who doesn't know who she is. And so I said, well, how do you know that? She said, because she doesn't even have a face. And so I thought that was very interesting. I'm not going to go into this in any kind of detail right now, but anyone who understands anything about the ontology of the face and how important it is will understand how deep that statement was looking at this. So the little brown feet to her didn't say anything. The fact that she didn't have a face said quite a bit. So I also want to say that I wouldn't say this was a method. I would say it was a mode in which we behaved. And I'll say it was, let me see, it keeps going back. Let me see. I used, and again, this is retrospectively, I didn't go in having thought about using the mode of grooves, but we did. We really worked through Dominic Hill's concept of grooves, which corresponds with Black feminism's deployment of embodied understanding, as well as Black girlhood studies centering in homage to living from the body. So this showed up in the importance to girls about what's going on right here, right now in this school. So for example, we could be talking about something, and there was a girl, she was a real leader. I'm gonna call her Tanisha here. She was once telling us the following story. She said, I tried to pick up a fight between a white dude and a Black dude. The police came and arrested me and the Black boy. By the way, this girl was 14 years old as well. They didn't do anything to the white boy. They put me and the Black boy in the back of a squad car. They put the handcuffs on me on tighter than usual. And I remember thinking, tighter than usual. They kept me in jail the whole weekend. Okay. let me go on a little bit. Now, some girls, I'll get to the rest of this text later. Some girls wanted to talk about their very strong dislike for their mothers, as I said earlier, but we weren't going to do that, not because I didn't want to talk about that topic. In fact, we did talk about it, but we couldn't stay on it because we had to find people that were testifiers. So I barely had a word to say, let alone provide a frame for that topic to get off and running. School pushout over problems pertaining to Black girls and dress code was ubiquitous as a desired topic of conversation for Black girls in all the schools I visited and for the African American Policy Forum. So that's where we got, there was a coincidence between, it coincided what they wanted to talk about and what the AAPF wanted to talk about. It came down to the problem of dress codes, the ways in which dress code rules penalize Black girls in their body provided an incontrovertible point of agreement between AAPF and the Black girls as far as possible topics for testimony went. So going back to Tanisha was telling us about having been thrown in the back of a squad car. I thought she was going to go on. And then she said, but she interrupted her own narrative about the weekend in the detention center and said, but that's not what we need to be talking about. And I said, really? And she said, no. And she said, we need to be talking about what's going on in this school right now, right here and now. Okay. So she led, and she was a real leader type of girl. So she said, she wanted to talk about an unjust rule that targeted the bodies of certain Black girls, okay? And she showed considerable skill in taking and considering the school side of the story. So she said something to this effect. I get why they want us to wear uniforms. Some kids have more money than others. They can dress better than other kids. If everyone's wearing a uniform, no one gets teased about their clothes. I don't have a problem with that. But then I saw some kids wearing whatever they wanted to. So I said to myself, if they're going to wear what they want to wear, so am I. But I got in trouble. Before we go on, I have to keep moving myself out of the way. Well, let me just go back. The problem that we're going to speak to has to do with a respectability politics that is really, really strong it can be really, really strong in Black communities and African American communities. And if you read some of Brittany Cooper's work, you will see that it has been used as a tool of survival sometimes. And then also it gets integrated and you can internalize white middle-class ways, aesthetics, and ways of being. But so I want to, before I go on though to that, I do want to give you a sense, even in another school where I was, the way this affects Black girls. So here I want you to listen to a Black girl. This is one girl, black girl speaking, but what you're going to hear her saying was actually given to me almost word for word, almost like spoken word poetry, but she was just speaking it. I probably put in a pause or a period, but this is what the girl said.
The lights are off. When the lights are on, the students don't have fun. They don't dance. They just walk around till the lights are off. Sometimes the students wear wristbands that glow in the dark. In the past, they cost $5. Some of the Black students couldn't afford them. The lights are turned off. But the teachers have flashlights and they use them mostly on Black girls who gather in the middle of the room at Guilford Middle School, while most of the white kids hang around the edges. The teachers use big flashlights to check the Black girls out, to check out their sexual conduct. I feel like I'm a security threat. I can't be myself. It feels like they can't trust any of the Black girls. If they have flashlights shining on us, it feels like being blocked into one place. It feels like I'm in a cage where you can talk and dance. This happens only with black girls. Most white girls run around, even chasing boys. It feels like something is wrong with Arlington.
Okay, so those sounds were added. That was actually played at the town hall. So going back to Tanisha's story, when she spoke about the problem with uniforms, some of the girls remained quiet, others spoke up, confirming Tanisha's conclusion. Some girls could wear what they wanted to, while other girls had to wear the uniform. And they don't mean just white girls, because actually most of the girls in the school were Black, but it's Black girls who had certain bodies, certain kinds of bodies. And so the Black girls that wouldn't get punished were able to enact what a philosopher named Michaela Perina has just been speaking with me about in conversation. They were able to be successful in this context at enacting a logic of imitation, which is imposed in white supremacist spaces. But the idea is this: you are to imitate, but actually you will never achieve what you're trying to imitate. Now, in this space, though, with all Black girls, the girls that had bodies that could imitate the respectability of a certain kind of white girl's body, they were allowed not to wear the uniforms. But Black girls who had bodies that failed at that imitation in this context, they weren't allowed to. So I asked, what kind of trouble do you get in? One girl was being punished as we spoke. I didn't even realize it. She said to me, you can either keep on the clothes you wore and sit by yourself all day long and miss your classes, or you can wear the clothes they give you. We're going to call her Elena. So she leaned back and said, see these pants? When she leaned back, it revealed a tight waistband. I got a better view of her legs. These pants, this is her speaking, are so tight they're cutting off my circulation. They give you clothes that are either too big or too small. Why didn't you choose the larger ones? I asked, because really it looked like she was in pain, and she was. And she responded, how would you like to wear big old clothes that make you look like a man? So I bet that Elena's response would be categorized as loud, disruptive, insubordinate, and in need of correction and punishment, instead of voicing concern about being masculinized or miscategorized as a man, both of which happen to Black girls and Black women, whether they're cis or trans. She was already in an alternative school, so what was the next alternative? Tanisha intervened again. I want to speak to the principal. We're with the principal. I do too, Elena said. And so we went off to go see the principal together, and nobody was loud or disruptive. We wanted to have something. We wanted to look at the rule and examine it and do the kind of thing that schools say. You should use your words. You shouldn't fight. These girls were in this school primarily for fighting. We ran into the counselor, Ms. Greenlee, who really loved the girls, and the girls loved her too. She greeted us with a big smile and invited us into her office space. Where are y'all headed? I guess we looked like we were on a mission or something. We're going to see the principal. And she responded, well, you know, what's going on? And so we spoke with her first. So there in Ms. Greenlee's space, Elena began her statement of the problem, which was pretty much the account that Tanisha had given. There was a rule about uniforms. Some girls could break it. Other girls like her were punished if they did. She showed Ms. Greenlee how tight her pants were. At that moment, a Black man entered the space, and it was a tight space. And anyone could enter that space at any time, uninvited. It seemed to me, now maybe I didn't understand the rules from my perspective. And from my perspective, he broke into our conversation with, there are other pants. You can choose larger pants. Ms. Greenlee, though, took his side. She confirmed his statement. Elena replied, all those other pants are too big. Some girls wear leggings to school and nobody says anything to them. How would you feel having to wear big clothes that make you look like a man, she asked. Desperation was pushing up against her voice and her face. Miss Greenlee turned to me, still smiling. And then she said, but you know how it is. She's speaking to me. Some girls can wear leggings, other girls can't. Some other girls don't look decent. Okay, so I'm pausing right now, but I didn't really pause. I looked at her and I said, well, I had one of those indecent bodies. I'll never know whether it was the general force emanating from my body that brought tears down her eyes. She began to cry. And then these words were whispered from her lips. I had one of those bodies too. Perhaps if Tanisha had been present, she would have seen me melting and said something to alert me to the fact this fight ain't over yet. The man had long since left the discussion. I have no idea where he was. We, that is Elena, Miss Greenlee, and then there was a third girl that was there. We changed positions. We were no longer seated, we were standing. Elena closest to the door. And then the other girl who hadn't spoken at all, we're gonna call her Cherie. She said something. She said, Miss Greenlee, when I don't wear my uniform, it's because it's not clean. My grandmother puts clothes on me that are clean. Miss Greenlee reminded Cherie, we have told your grandmother that if she needed something, she is only to let us know. If she needs money for laundry, she can let us know. Cherie's eyes narrowed, her face went hard. And then Miss Greenlee said, the rule is not going to change. The rule is not going to change. She said it, I don't know how many times, but it began to sound like a refrain in my ears. Elena left the room. She didn't look back. Miss Greenlee, though, ran down the hall after her. It's like she realized in that moment, oh, I've broken something, I've lost something. And so at that moment, I won't go into this, but Cherie wanted me to take a testimony from her, and she took it. I gave her testimony took her testimony for a little pocket documentary in which she said, I love my father to pieces. He physically abuses me. It's got to stop. So I'm not going to go on into things I could here. I mean, I could talk a little bit more about respectability politics, which really, I do want to say this about it, however. Respectability politics, and I also want to say this, one of the things that can happen with Black girls, as I said earlier, it can be thought, they can be adultified, and it's thought that they are women and they're treated like women. But another thing that can happen through respectability politics, sometimes a Black woman will feel that she's protecting a Black girl, that she knows the ways in which Black girls will be punished for the ways they look in their clothes, for the ways that their bodies present in the kind of white hegemonic space. And so through that form of protection, she's actually punishing. Through these forms of protection, it cuts off the possibilities actually for Black girls and for Black women, themselves. So I want to also add, there was no process of conflict resolution. Within the process of conflict resolution set in motion by a Black girl who had used her words to approach and elucidate a situation of social injustice against Black girls. And she expressed a reasoned, effective, incontrovertible position. Yet there was no process of conflict resolution. Within the process of conflict resolution, followed by another Black girl, Elena, who had used her words to repudiate a system bent on denigrating her body and spirit and that of other Black girls' bodies and spirits in the name of a masked, then unmasked respectability politics named decency. So I want to end by saying what I learned from some of the things I learned. So in focus groups with Black girls, I learned about some of the ways they refuse to comply with controlling images of Black womanhood and Black girlhood that reflect, quote, from Patricia Hill Collins, the dominant group's interest in maintaining Black girls and women's subordination, end of quote. Because Black womanhood and Black girlhood have merged in white hegemonic space when Black people look at themselves and feel themselves and look at each other and feel each other through the eyes of other people, Black people often look at Black girls through versions of the same controlling images through which Black women are seen and felt. This merger, which sometimes results in adultification of Black girls, can lead to a perception of Black girls as aggressively feminine and cause them to be, quote, punished more harshly than their peers for the same behaviors when referred to the disciplinary office. However, the merger may indicate, as I said before, that the deployment of a politics of respectability and dissemblance that seeks to protect Black girls, even as it is deployed through a white hegemonic gaze embodied in a Black woman, as it was embodied in Miss Greenlee. Thusly deployed, protection is a Black girl's punishment that functions to stabilize or reinforce white hegemonic space. A Black woman who administers this type of loving, caring treatment punishes as she seeks to protect. Black girls refuse, but I learned that Black girls' approach might sometimes best be described as an I can before it becomes a refusal. The I can is the stance that the Olympic champion Simone Biles took against the International Gymnastics Federation. Her behavior exemplified the embodiment of an I can approach. Simone Biles was not properly awarded for some of the difficulty she performed. They told her, we are not going to give you points for the difficulty, because they wanted to discourage her from doing those particular things. In the past, in the Olympics, if they thought that a trick or something was too difficult, that people could get hurt, they said it wasn't allowed. This is not what they told her. They said, go ahead and perform it. We're not going to give you the difficulty. So take the risk. You take the risk and fall, then you don't get the extra points. And if you do it and you don't fall, you don't get anything. So Simone Biles, she stated they don't want the field to be too far apart, and that's just something on them. I think that she left, and probably rightly so in her space, she left race out of her particular comment. But she said that she was going to continue doing what she did. When asked why, she replied, because I can. Now, sadly enough, she did stop doing it because the risk, she understood, she felt, the lived experience of having to do that and take that risk at the Olympics when she was not going to be rewarded for it. And when she was actually being punished for it, then it became a refusal to even do that. So some of the other things I learned, I can't go back and explain this, and we didn't have time, but one of the girls in our focus groups, she recreated the town hall and got the results she needed right then and there. So for her, she would say, I have seen what a town hall is and what it's for. I will put one into motion right here to get what I need. I reimagine it. I recreate it because I can. Then you had the one girl, Cherie. I love my father to pieces and demand that he not be allowed to abuse me because I can. And then you have Tanisha and Elena. I will tell this woman what we should be talking about. The dress code used against us. I tell her because I can. So living in focus with Black girls, I learned what it's like to live in a world of beings who exemplify an activist theory of cognition, which at its most basic understands perception in terms of the I can, and in terms of a pragmatic orientation towards the environment, which is not just physical, but also social and cultural. I learned that some Black girls will seek to perceive themselves and each other through certain frameworks that make them perceivable to each other. They will often speak up for themselves and each other, perhaps because seeing themselves in each other provides the condition that enables them to know, I can. And I'll stop there. Could go on, but I will stop there. Thank you very much. I can take questions, or I can put my email in the chat, and I would be happy to take questions then.